It's February 1947. A decorated Navy pilot is flying over the South Pole on a mission that the government swears never happened. And his name is Admiral Richard Bird. Now, this guy's a war hero, a polar explorer, and by all accounts, a man who did not scare easily. But what he would later write in his private flight log would sound less like military reconnaissance and a whole lot more like a message from another world. As Bird's plane crossed the South Pole that day, he reported something that defied physics altogether. He said that the miles and miles of ice that he'd seen for hours while he was flying completely stopped. He said it gave way to open land covered in green. There was forests, lakes, and mountains glowing gold with sunlight. And that sunlight that he saw, it wasn't coming from space. He said it was coming from inside the Earth. Now, that's not the only thing that happened, because it seemed like his cockpit went crazy. He said his compass began spinning out of control, and all the other gauges, he had the temperature gauges, the fuel gauges, he said everything just started going crazy. And before he can think about it, he tried to radio back to base, but he said his transmission was hijacked. He later wrote down in his diary that he heard a calm voice that didn't sound human. He said that it came through his headset, and it told him, "Welcome, Admiral.
Welcome, Admiral.
We've been expecting you." And as you can imagine, when Bird returned home, his entire report was confiscated. He was debriefed behind closed doors, and all those files, every log, every flight record, were all classified top secret. And he was told, never ever speak of this again. But years later, his supposed diary had resurfaced. And what it described, it wasn't just a flight over Antarctica. It was an entry into a world right below our feet. And this is the same world that ancient texts have been whispering about for centuries. They speak about hidden cities beneath the earth, an inner sun, and beings that guard humanity's deepest secrets. You have some that call it Agartha, others call it Shambhala. They believed that this was a realm of the gods that they could find if only they dug deep enough. And if you think that sounds insane, there are actually maps, real ancient maps, that show openings at both poles. Now, Bird, he wasn't the first to claim that the Earth was hollow, but he might have just been the first man to fly into it. And here's one of the questions that keeps this legend alive. If he didn't go inside the Earth, then why did the U.S. government seal every record of his mission and shut down all follow-up expeditions for years to come? Now, tonight, we're going to talk about what did Admiral Byrd really see? Why did the Nazis send entire teams to Antarctica looking for that same entrance? And why do ancient cultures, from Tibet to the Hopi to the Norse, all describe an underground world ruled by luminous beings? Is that all just a coincidence, or could it be a connection? Because maybe the greatest discovery in human history isn't waiting for us in the stars. It's right there below our feet. Welcome back, listeners and watchers, to another dark and fascinating episode of Relative Perspective. As always, I'm your host, Stephen. Now, last month was one hell of a month. We wrapped it up in a tight little bow with 4 spine-tingling episodes fit for the Halloween season. Now, this month of November, I'm going in a completely different direction. I'm going to have 4 episodes this month all about forbidden knowledge and the conspiracy theories that's all wrapped up in it. So, believe me when I tell you, you do not want to miss any of these shows. Now that's out of the way, let's get into our first episode of this month. Tonight, we're talking about a secret that the Earth itself might be hiding from us. This is a mystery that's buried so deep that entire governments have tried to erase it. But first, I want to back up just for a second. Before we start chasing lost civilizations and ancient tunnels, we've got to do a deep dive and talk about the man who supposedly actually flew into one and who, in my opinion, started all these recent theories about hollow Earth theory. Now, before you say, oh, Stephen, please don't be crazy and go down this crazy ass path, I just want you to sit tight because I promise you, by the end of this, there are definitely going to be some things that's going to have your head spinning. Let's get into it. Okay, I want to start by saying that Admiral Byrd, he wasn't some kind of crazy conspiracy theorist that was scribbling down in his little crazy book in some bunker. This dude was one of the most respected pilots in U.S. history. And that's saying a lot because we had just gone through World War II and they had a lot of great pilots. And this dude was probably one of the best. He was also a pioneer of polar exploration. This dude was so badass that he was a Medal of Honor recipient. This was a man that the U.S. government actually put their complete faith in to run entire naval operations. And that's saying a lot. This dude had ice in his veins and credibility carved into his name. So yes, I guess you could say that he could be completely trusted. So when he claimed that something crazy happened to him when he flew down there in Antarctica, people listened up until the government told them not to. Operation Highjump, that is the mission in question tonight. It launched in 1946, right after World War II. Publicly, it was described as a massive research expedition. Now, under Admiral Byrd's command, he had 4,700 men, at least 13 ships, and they also sent a bunch of aircraft to basically chart uncharted territory down there. And they also claimed that they were going to train for cold weather warfare. But here's the problem as I see it. It's crazy to me that you send the largest naval armada since the war ended just to practice setting up tents or something. To me, I think something else was definitely going on. And within months of arriving, the mission, it was abruptly cut short, 6 months short to be exact. And the official story was that there was bad weather. Duh. I mean, it's freaking Antarctica. But we're not here to talk about the official story. We're here to talk about the unofficial story. Because later it came out that crewmen talked about seeing strange lights in the sky, crazy malfunctioning equipment, and aircraft that simply disappeared without a trace. And when Admiral Byrd returned home, he didn't celebrate. Here's a really crazy part about this story. On his way back to the U.S., he stopped in Chile and he gave a weird interview to this Chilean newspaper where he actually warned that America needs to prepare for enemies that can fly from pole to pole in a matter of minutes. Now, I want you to let that sink in. Remember, it's 1947. This was 2 years before the Air Force even had supersonic jets. So, what exactly did he see out there to make him say that? Whatever it was, the Pentagon, it buried it fast. Byrd's logs, they disappeared into classified archives. And the government, of course, hoped that this would go away, but it didn't. And from there, the legend of the Hollow Earth exploded. You had writers, mystics, and even occultists that claimed that Byrd had stumbled on to what they called Agartha, a vast inner realm home to an ancient race that's been watching us since the dawn of civilization. And here's where it even gets stranger. You had Tibetan monks, Native American elders, and Norse sagas from 1,000 years apart that all describe something eerily similar. They all say that there's a hidden land of radiant beings right below our feet. So, either every ancient culture got the same hallucinations, or they were all describing the same place from different corners of the world. And that brings us to the real question. Was Admiral Byrd's mission an accident of discovery, or was the U.S. Navy already looking for something that they knew was already there? Because when you start connecting all the dots between wartime intelligence, Nazi occult research, and the Thule Society's obsession with the world inside, that's when you begin to realize maybe this wasn't about exploration at all. Maybe it was about something way more disturbing. Okay, we mentioned Operation Highjump earlier. What was that about? Officially, the government called it a scientific expedition, but unofficially, it looked more like a military operation wearing a lab coat. Now, let's go ahead and break that down. You had 13 ships, 4,700 men, then you had aircraft carriers, destroyers, submarines, and the best radar tech that they had for that day. Now, I want you to ask yourself, what research mission needs depth charges and submachine guns? Hell, the last I checked, penguins are really not that hard to subdue. Like I said before, the mission launched August 26th of 1946, and Admiral Bird's orders came straight from the top of the U.S. Navy. But that's where things get kind of murky. All the official briefings, they mentioned testing equipment, and basically they were just going out there to map Antarctica. But internal memos, the ones that have leaked over the years, they paint a completely different picture. They mention strategic reconnaissance, threat assessments, and one phrase shows up over and over and over again: potential enemy activity. Now, what enemy were they expecting to find all the way down there at the South Pole in 1946? Among the men that were all stationed there, they claim that rumors spread really, really fast. Some say that they saw bright discs in the sky flying faster than anything that they'd ever seen. Now, I want you to understand something. These guys had just went through World War II. They'd seen pretty much every plane that they had in the world. And now they're saying that they saw something that flew faster than anything that they'd ever seen. That, to me, that's crazy. And others talked about sudden equipment failures. And you had a few stories that claimed that the patrols were ambushed, not by human forces, but by craft that flew straight up out of the water, glowing and completely silent. Okay, guys, I know that all this sounds insane until you realize those same kind of UFOs started getting reported all over the world right after Project Highjump ended. Is that a coincidence? Maybe, I don't know. But I want you to consider this. The mission was scheduled to last for 6 to 8 months, but it ended in just 8 weeks. And remember, Bird, he wasn't some kind of coward, but him and his men, they packed up and left in a hurry. And they weren't talking about scientific studies anymore. And remember, I mentioned this earlier. On their way back to the U.S., Bird had stopped in Chile, and somehow a newspaper was able to get an interview with him. And this is what Bird said: "The greatest danger facing mankind comes from the poles." He also said that we must remain vigilant because we can be attacked by flying objects that can travel from pole to pole at incredible speeds. Now, I want you to understand something. This isn't hearsay. This is an actual quote that was printed in that Chilean newspaper. Okay, whether Bird meant aliens, foreign technology, or something different, we'll never know. Because after that interview, his lips were sealed tighter than a vault. Now, when the fleet returned home, they lost ships, several aircraft, and a lot of crewmen. Officially, they said they were all accidents. But remember, we're not here to talk about the official story. We're talking about the unofficial story, because later on, some of the veterans that were there, they later told family that they saw things that they were ordered to forget. There was one sailor that claimed that the sky lit up like daylight during one of those crazy Antarctic storms. And another claimed that he watched a plane get sliced out of the air with what looked like just a light in the sky. And the government response, of course, was total silence. Now, here's where it gets even stranger, if you can imagine. Documents from Nazi Germany recovered after the war show the Thule Society believed that there was a hidden entrance into the Earth, and they sent expeditions to Antarctica before the war even ended. Now, these guys, they weren't myth hunters. They were SS officers, and they were funded by a group called let me see if I can get this right. It's called the Onondaga. I'm sure I butchered that, but I'll put it up on the screen so you can read it. I think it's pronounced Onondaga. These guys were part of that crazy Nazi occult division that Hitler wanted to send all over the world to get all these relics. And their mission while they were down there was to locate the gateway to Agartha. So by the time that Admiral Bird arrived, the U.S., it wasn't going to Antarctica to explore. They were trying to basically get there before anybody else did. Now, I want you to think about this. Right after Operation Highjump ended in 1947, the same year that Byrd made his warnings, that's when we got Roswell, we get the birth of the CIA, and we get the beginning of UFO secrecy, all within months. To me, that's too many coincidences to count. Or was it a chain reaction from a discovery that we were never supposed to make? Because whatever Admiral Byrd found in those frozen wastelands, it scared the most powerful military on Earth into silence. And believe it or not, that silence has lasted for over 80 years. So, if Admiral Byrd really stumbled onto something under that ice, what could it have been? Because the idea of a world beneath ours, it didn't start with conspiracy forums. It started thousands of years ago, long before satellites and submarines could test the theory. In Hindu texts, there's a place called Patala. This is a subterranean realm said to be filled with radiant cities and advanced beings. Then in Buddhist scripture, you have what they call Shambhala. Now, this is said to be a hidden kingdom where enlightened masters, they guard forbidden knowledge until humans are basically responsible enough to use it. Then you have the Hopi of North America that talk about ant people that lived underground and sheltered the first humans from a great cataclysm. And finally, in ancient China, legends spoke of tunnels leading into an inner paradise ruled by what they call the king of the world. Now, what's weird is you have different names, different eras, but they all have the same pattern. They all say that there's a vast realm below us, housing beings older and wiser, but they're hidden for a reason. Okay, here's where myth meets paper trail. By the 1800s, science and mysticism, they started colliding. There's a guy that I'm sure that most of y'all have heard of. His name is Edmund Halley. Yeah, the same guy that the comet's named after. He proposed that the Earth is basically a hollow shell with concentric layers, each with its own magnetic field. Now, later in the 19th century, you had an Army officer by the name of John Sims Jr. This dude, he publicly declared that there were openings at each pole. Hell, he even petitioned Congress to fund an expedition inside these holes. And as you can imagine, they laughed him out of the room. But what's crazy is just a few decades later, explorers like Byrd would fly to those same coordinates. Is that coincidence or prophecy? Here's where it kind of gets uncomfortable. After Operation Highjump had ended, the U.S. quietly established what they called Operation Deep Freeze in 1955, turning Antarctica into a permanent military research zone. Then just 4 years later, in 1959, you had every major nation sign the Antarctic Treaty, and they all agreed that no one could mine, claim, or militarize the continent. Now, I want you to think about that. It's the middle of the Cold War, when every superpower was grabbing land like it was going out of style. And you're telling me that they suddenly agreed to share one of the world's richest, most unexplored places on Earth. Why would they do that? I mean, they're basically saying they're never going to touch it. Why would they do that? Now, I'll tell you what they officially said. They said that they wanted to preserve scientific cooperation, which I don't even know what the hell that means. But like I said, I don't want to talk about officially. I want to talk about it unofficially. Maybe they all know that there's something down there that they can't control. Now, what's crazy is over the years, a lot of rumors supposedly leaked. You had whispers of magnetic anomalies. Then you had satellite imagery showing circular depressions, kind of like, I mean, this isn't a real picture, but that's basically what they were trying to say it looked like. And you even had NASA flight paths that mysteriously started avoiding certain coordinates. And every time someone tried to publish data of what lies beneath the ice down there in Antarctica, the information, it either vanished or it was redacted. And yet, the old stories, they just keep matching up. Ancient texts, modern radar, and one man's flight log that shouldn't exist. So maybe Admiral Byrd, he didn't discover Agartha. Maybe he confirmed it. Okay, if you've made it this far with me, then you've probably asked yourself the same question that I have. If Admiral Byrd's story was just a rumor, then why did the government try so hard to hide it? Because, like we mentioned earlier, right after Project Highjump ended, they started appearing that we didn't know even existed. Let's start with one piece of evidence that refuses to die, and that's Admiral Bird's diary. Now, the version that most people know surfaced decades after Admiral Bird's death, and supposedly it was leaked by a family friend. And believe me, there are some crazy claims. He claims to have flown through a polar opening where he said he saw mountains of green, a strange glowing glow, and he also said that there was buildings of impossible beauty. And like we mentioned before, he described his radio was actually taken over. And not only that, his aircraft was being controlled. He said that he tried to control it himself, but he couldn't. He said basically it landed on this platform, and he said the platform didn't look man-made at all. And when he finally landed, he said he was met by these tall beings with long flowing hair and luminous eyes. Now, according to Bird, they had this long conversation, but their basic message was that humanity is out of balance, that all the wars we're having and all these nuclear tests that we're doing are echoing through worlds that we have no comprehension of. And after they had this conversation with him, they let him go, of course, with a warning. They told him that when the time comes, you must return and share this message. And skeptics are quick to point out that there's no official record of these logs that he had. Historians, they call it a hoax, but here's a twist. The paper stock from this diary, the ink composition that was used, and the typewriter font date exactly back to the 1940s. So if all of this was faked, someone went through a whole hell of a lot of trouble to forge this with period correct equipment. And you have to ask yourself, why would they do that? There was no fame, no money to be had. I mean, hell, if it was me that was holding on to this stuff, I'd expect some money, but nobody got paid for this stuff. It's just a story that refuses to stay buried. And it might shock you to find out that Bird wasn't alone. In 1948, there was an engineer by the name of Ray Palmer. He was a publisher of a magazine called Amazing Stories. Now, this guy, he claimed that he was contacted by some whistleblowers or insiders who described an underground civilization connected by these vast tunnel systems. And you guessed it, it was down there in Antarctica. Now, here's what's kind of weird. Several independent explorers, they tried to retrace Bird's route, but guess what? They vanished. Now, here's where the hollow earth theory gets really, really strange. You have miners in South Africa and oil crews in Siberia that all claim to have reported hearing weird metallic echoes and even human sounds coming from miles below the earth. And in 1989, a Russian news station aired a story claiming that a borehole microphone picked up screaming voices from way deep down in the earth. Now, of course, you're going to have skeptics that dismiss this as interference. But the recording, which is still floating around online, it sounds eerily similar to human screams. Now, all these stories, maybe that's why the governments, they stay quiet. Because if there's remnants of something down there, whether it's ancient, alive, or mechanical, the last thing that they'd want is for us to start digging. Now, here's the kicker. There's actually declassified FBI documents that claim that there's advanced civilizations living under the Earth's surface right now. This is all in connection with what they call Project Blue Book. Now, of course, those pages are all blacked out and redacted, but the headers are still there. Now, that's not Reddit. That's actual federal documents. Now, here's what kind of keeps me awake at night. Maybe Bird's warnings, they weren't about aliens. Maybe they were something about something much older and much, much darker. And here's the strangest part. Nearly every psychic, mystic, or remote viewer since the 1970s who claimed to see into the earth, they described the same thing. A massive central sun, cities made of crystal, and a presence that watches us, not with hatred, but with disappointment. Now, could all this be myth? Sure, but the consistency across time, culture, and classified files, they all suggest something much, much deeper. Maybe we're not alone on this planet, and maybe we never were. Okay, so here's what bothers me. First, I want to start with that Antarctic treaty that we spoke about earlier. This thing was signed by every major power on Earth. You had the US, Russia, China, and the UK. These are all countries that can't even agree with what they want to have for lunch. And all of a sudden, you're telling me that they decided that they're going to share an entire continent. And they all said no mining, no drilling, no colonizing, and no questions asked. And like I said earlier, the stated reason, they wanted to preserve scientific cooperation. Again, whatever the hell that means. I don't even know what that means. But I think there's an unstated reason. Because if you dig too deep down there, you might find something you can't put back. Here's what I know. To me, silence is the loudest sound when someone's trying to hide something. And the world's governments have been very, very quiet about what's below the ice in Antarctica. And if you're starting to feel like this silence is too perfect to be natural, I want you to stick around, because in our final chapter, we'll look at why the story of Agartha might not just be the story of our past. It might explain what we're going to go through in our future. Now, I want you to think about this for a second. Every ancient civilization, every culture that ever looked at the stars, they also looked below their feet. They all spoke of gods that came up from the ground, not just from the heavens. And they also spoke of knowledge that's hidden in the earth, not just in the sky. And here we are, still digging, still building machines that can fly higher and dig deeper. And it seems like we're busting our ass to break things that we just don't understand. And if Admiral Byrd was right, if there's a civilization beneath our feet waiting and watching, maybe they've been waiting for us to mature. If they're there, you know they've seen our wars, our greed, and our pride. And maybe they've made the decision that humanity isn't quite ready for the knowledge that they have to give. Or maybe they're not waiting at all. Maybe they're warning us. Because almost every legend says the same thing. When the gates of Agartha open again, it's not going to be for exploration. It's going to be for a reckoning. In the Hindu culture, Patala arises when the world gets way too out of balance. And in the Hopi prophecies, the ant people return when we on Earth forgot how to basically live with the Earth. And then we have Byrd's alleged diary. There's one line that says that we must be cautious, for the hollow places are awakening. Now, what does that mean, you might ask? Was it a metaphor? Or was it a warning? Or was it a confession from a man who might have seen too much? Maybe all of the world's forbidden knowledge points to one simple fact. That humanity, it's always been haunted by the same question. Are we the top of creation, or are we just the surface layer of something much, much deeper? We spend billions and billions of dollars searching the stars, but maybe paradise or judgment, it's not out there at all. Maybe it's waiting right below our feet. And maybe the next time that ice shifts, or the next time that ground shakes, it won't just be the earth moving. It could be a door opening. Okay, guys, thanks for riding along on this deep dive through ancient forbidden history. You've been listening to Relative Perspective, and this month I'm calling it Forbidden Knowledge November. As always, I'm your host, Stephen. Now, if this episode made you think twice about what might be below our feet, I want you to go ahead and pound down on that like button, hit the subscribe button, and share this with a friend who loves a good mystery. And I also want you to drop a comment. If Agartha opened up tomorrow, would you want to go inside? I know I wouldn't, but what would you want to do? Also, I don't want you to forget to hammer down on that notification bell, because next week's episode, we're going a lot deeper into that forbidden knowledge that we spoke about earlier. And if you've got your own crazy, scary story, all you have to do is email it to me at relativeperspective76@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your story, and who knows, maybe I'll be able to play it in a future episode. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, keep your mind open, your lights low, and I want you to remember, sometimes the truth is closer than you may think. God bless you, we love you, and have a good night. Peace out. Susty. Love you, bye.